Hello, and welcome to another edition of Lean Catalyst Strategies and Tactics for the Transformational CEO. My name is Damon Baker, and I'm the CEO of Lean Focus, and I will be the interviewer today for our esteemed guests who I'll get to in a minute. In this dynamic monthly 1 hour interview series, we bring together like-minded CEOs and leaders who've successfully embraced lean thinking to drive exceptional results in their organizations. And it's through captivating conversations we'll dive into their remarkable achievements, uncovering the strategies, insights, and practical wisdom that have propelled their organizations forward. Each series features an in-depth interview with the distinguished CEO who's demonstrated extraordinary leadership in leveraging lean principles. And it's a great opportunity for them to share their experiences, strategies, and valuable knowledge so that others can apply this to their own leadership journeys. So it's my privilege and honor to introduce today's guest, Pat Byrne. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning. Good morning, Damon.
So Pat was recently the Senior Vice President of Operational Transformation at GE, reporting to the CEO, Larry Culp, whose focus was on safety, quality, delivery, and cost, and integrating lean priorities into GE's split into both GE Healthcare, GE Aerospace, and GE Vernova. He previously led GE's renewable energies onshore wind business and also GE Digital, enhancing GE's digital transformation across various sectors. Before GE, Pat was the senior vice president at Fortive, which is a Danaher spinoff. And then prior to that, held several executive roles at Danaher, was the president of Tektronix, Intermec Technologies, and worked for Agilent's electronic measurement group. Started his career at Hewlett-Packard. Pat is also a board member, and he's currently the chairman at Verra Mobility and Diebold Nixdorf. Pat earned his Bachelor in Science from the University of California at Berkeley and an MS from Stanford University. Is that all accurate and true, Pat?
Yeah, that's great, Damon.
All right. So for those of you that haven't met Pat before, Pat, what's something interesting that maybe people don't know about you that you'd like to share with the group?
Well, I think early in my career, when I was in graduate school, I went to London. My wife and I were newly married, and she was an English major. And England, of course, is just a fantastic place. And I was in graduate school, so I figured out how to get to England, and I taught at a university in London. And we had a great time for that year. So I was in graduate school, and I taught microwave theory and semiconductor physics for a year in London. And that was a great experience. Great on a personal level, living overseas early in our married life, and then working at a university overseas was just an eye-opening experience.
That's an amazing story. I learned something new about you today too. Very good. Well, I want to get to the GE story pretty quickly. Today I pulled some information on GE's performance, and it's nothing short of remarkable what GE's been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time. So from 2019 to year-end 2023, the total shareholder return over 48%, on a CAGR basis, 11% annually. And then EBITDA has been growing 6% CAGR as well. And I think we all know sort of prior to 2018, the story there and the challenges that GE had, but it's probably arguably one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in the United States, if not the world, in quite some time, especially considering the size of that organization, the complexity of that organization, the challenges facing the organization at the time, and even ongoing. So I want to go back in a time machine to 2018. Pat gets a call. It says, hey, we've got this job for you, Pat. It's this little company you may know of called GE. What's going through your head at the time?
Yeah, so Larry became the CEO, chairman of GE in mid to late 2018. I think it's the fall of 2018. And so starting in early 2019, I started to discuss with him the possibility of coming and leading GE Digital. GE Digital think about it as $1 billion software division inside GE that really is focused on mostly the core vertical markets GE is already in. So think about software that sells into places where they're using gas turbines to operate a power plant. for example, or grid software that's used that goes with a grid hardware and some of the biggest customers. So really intriguing opportunity. At the time, of course, there's just all these question marks about GE, right? Just like you, probably just like lots of other people, I had read the books about GE, and sort of the story about GE over the many decades. Really, as a company that had been a tremendous innovator, a great operator, financially brilliant, all those things. And then it hit this rough patch. And, of course, there's been books written about that. So it was really into that, somewhat, unknown, but really the real opportunity. This is a company with tremendous technology and great people, an incredible brand. It's a global brand like maybe no other global brand. And so, the brand is bigger than the business. And so the question is, can the management team, and of course I'm not speaking for GE here, but really the kind of the thesis of it is this: if you can unlock value here and continue to improve these businesses, it's a tremendous opportunity. So that was really the basis of joining. And of course, Larry was a big part of that, because I'd admired him, I'd worked with him before. He's one of the great CEOs. So it was a real privilege to join.
So how quickly did you realize you were going to be pulling double duty and not only leading GE Digital, but leading GE's lean turnaround, if you will? And I think at the time, you guys didn't even have a name for what you were going to call the operating system or the new way of working. Did I get that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. So the lean journey for GE had started, as you can imagine, right as Larry joined. And so by the time I joined, it started to be underway. For myself, I was leading GE Digital starting in the middle of 2019. By the middle of 2020, so this is just as COVID, it's a weird year, right? 2020, right after COVID started, Larry asked me to lead the lean transformation, really the corporate office for lean across the company. And so really figuring out what are the best ways of approaching this at such a large enterprise across all those businesses. And then later on, a little bit later on in that year is when I started to also lead onshore wind, which is an $8 to $10 billion wind turbine business. So I had a couple of CEO jobs and then this corporate office. And then the last thing there was leading the corporate office on safety. We talk about safety, quality, delivery, cost. And so we made tremendous progress in safety at GE, really proud of it. But those are my two corporate responsibilities and two operating responsibilities. So maybe the short answer to your question is kind of a year in.
Okay. I'm curious, as you're like listing off all those responsibilities, when you ever slept during that time?
Yeah. Well, it was COVID, right? So it was this weird world where we're not getting on airplanes anymore. And of course, it's a global business, so days start early and they finish. But it was it's really remarkable time in a lot of ways, but extremely busy, as you guess from that list of things.
Yeah. Culturally, I can imagine that GE had a lot of unique circumstances. So you had this tremendous legacy and this history of success, and Jack Welch and many other CEOs before him. Just as you talked about, like this tremendous brand recognition and equity globally. But even like you can read books about GE's attempts to implement Lean and Six Sigma, and to some levels of varying degrees of success, at least with Six Sigma. I don't know as much maybe about the Lean story, but it was kind of held up as the secret sauce, if you will, of why GE was so successful. And as you come in to an organization, I know you, and I know you're a person who's a great problem solver, and you seek to understand before firing bullets and those kinds of things. How do you understand the current state of what's working well, what's not working so well? What are the things that we need to change or add new that we haven't been doing, which are part of the reason we are where we are? So how do you, in that first year, how do you take an inventory of all of those things, understanding that GE is a large, very large organization, right, and you don't have the luxury of time to like get your arms around all of it?
Yeah, so let me answer that in two different ways. One in the businesses I was operating. How did I assess that and and focus the organization on where we should focus for improvement. And then the larger GE picture. So in GE Digital and in Onshore Wind, it was really identifying really what's the core improvement that needs to be made that's a business imperative. How does this flywheel really work? And and those are very different businesses. The onshore wind business is you're manufacturing a turbine, and then you're installing it, and then you're operating it in many cases, and you have real operational obligations for how that wind turbine is working. The digital business, it's a software business, so it's a lot more about adoption and churn and recurring revenue, and how do you continue to grow value to customers. And so in those two, really what we did was really try to identify the top priorities that we should focus on. I mean, GE and this is is a tremendously strong engineering culture, a very smart, hardworking people, a lot of dedication to customers. So it's really about activating what is a tremendous capability fundamentally inside the organization. And that's how we approach that. On a broader GE basis, as a corporate person working with these other 20 to 30 operating divisions across the organization, it's mostly trying to it is really helping the operating leaders lead most effectively. They run the business, they own the business, no ambiguity. There isn't a big corporate team telling them what to do. I'm not even sure that would work. It certainly wasn't that way. It was really about trying to help the leaders with some core capabilities that would help them become better problem solvers, help them with operating cadences and operating reviews and simplifying KPIs. Much of that was in place, and so it really is trying to make that more consistent and up our game. And that was what was happening across. And of course, I was leading a couple of those divisions, so I had to, as you say, eat your own dog food, right? I actually had to work this way while also trying to help other leaders through this small corporate team.
Did you uncover or discover sort of like a proliferation of priorities where the organization had maybe taken on too much and had spread itself too thin across multiple things and wasn't being honest about what it truly was able to do, especially in the context of, you talk about the flywheel. It's like, what's most important to run and grow and make this business profitable, and do those priorities help or hurt that, or distract us from doing the core things that make this business go?
Oftentimes the answer, of course, is yes. And oftentimes, a leader's weakness is their strength overplayed. And so that's true of organizations as well. So you take this tremendous organization with all these smart, hardworking people who love the customers and are, focused on doing the very best. And what can happen in those organizations, and I'll just talk about GE Digital and Onshore Wind, is, and of course, they had different starting points, but it is, there is really, it ends up with a tendency towards too many KPIs, a tendency towards, I think it's one of the powerful things of safety, quality, delivery, cost in that order, is because it establishes a priority set. And that's very meaningful. Those are live discussions about what are the priorities in the organization. And Larry framing it up that well was super helpful to me as an operating leader.
Do you felt like the leaders were relieved or uncomfortable that we've set clear priorities around what metrics matter, or did they sort of fall back into the old ways of like, we need to measure all these things because they're all important? Or was there like a collective sigh of relief in the room where it was like, oh, finally, we don't have to be great at everything, we can focus?
Right. I think there's some or probably both of those, but I think overall my experience with the two businesses that I was leading is people were glad for the focus.
Yeah.
Because the company had been through quite a bit. It's really looking to what is a pathway that we can improve. And again, you have tremendous energy and capability. It's really bringing that to bear on the top priorities. So once those are established, and you start to get that you start to get that PDCA cycle working. You start to actually make progress, and you get those good reps going, and then that lives a life of its own once it's going.
So I want to shift gears and maybe talk about problem solving, which I think is related to the metrics conversation. So rather quickly, I know you led the charge to create a standardized process of problem solving, a lexicon, an approach, a terminology, the toolbox, the form that you present, and all these kinds of things in a company the size of GE. And outsiders may have looked at that decision and said, problem solving, like really, like imagine getting on an analyst call and saying, we're going to focus on installing a standard problem solving process within our businesses that we can use to close performance gaps. And they say, okay, great, what's next?
Right.
So how did you determine that was what was needed? B, how did you communicate something that I think people oftentimes perceive as like, oh, I already know how to do that. Look where I've gotten to in my career and how successful I've been, to why that's so important, how it's going to help us, and why they as leaders should lead the culture of problem solving in order for it to be successful.
Right. So one of the experiences through this is that if you think about what does problem solving give you, it gives you, there's 4 big steps in problem solving, and then I'll get to the answers. Defining the problem, finding concentration, finding really the root cause, which is the broken process, and then establishing countermeasures, effective countermeasures that drive impact. And so that's really the musculature. That's really what drives impact, is being able to apply it. Now, when you don't have great problem solving, you end up firefighting rather than problem solving. You end up with you have a forecast you're trying to hit, and you're just working like hell to try to get there as hard as you can. And you're not at root cause. You actually are spinning, and we would find that. And so I think the rationale for applying problem solving was to make progress. So now how did we communicate it? It's a lot of we built a mechanism so that we could show what we expected in problem solving, and then we trained a lot, and we went to work with the operating organizations. Because what you don't want to do is fake problem solving and just fill out the form. That's a real trap. And doing good work at each of those 4 steps is the essence of good problem solving.
Yeah, there's obviously a technical component to it that you laid out the process, but I would say probably bigger than that, maybe even more important, is the cultural aspect of it. The language, the way we work with one another, the way we collaborate, the way we talk about problems. And you can even close your eyes and listen to an individual or a team presenting their progress on problem solving and know where they're at in the process once you get good enough at this to know whether or not they're stuck, they need help, they're spinning their wheels. And that can drive questions, and questions can be uncomfortable in a culture that's not used to questions and coaching. So where was GE at in that spectrum? Because I feel like in Danaher it was just 10 years of my life with questions, and it's like no matter if I had the right answer, there was always more questions, and everybody just sort of knew that, and we knew that that was the expectation. So we weren't like offended by it or upset by it, but because that was a culture. But so what was the culture in GE at the time around when a leader like yourself would go into an operating review and ask questions about the progress we're making or the quality of a root cause and countermeasure that had been performed around a key issue in the business? Because I know you've seen those conversations get rather tense if they're not handled the correct way, and if the person receiving the question doesn't feel safe and doesn't understand what the questions are about and why you're asking them and these kinds of things.
Right. Yeah, so that I can't speak for all of GE. It's a huge company, but I can talk about my own experience in the organizations that I was in, and I think it's similar across the organization. One of the key things in that discussion is creating a mechanism where we're having a frank, candid, transparent discussion about our performance relative to expectations. We're not trying to make it sound better than it is. We're going to honestly, and we're going to clear the calendar so we can have that substantial discussion. So that has to be okay for people to want to do that. And so part of it is setting the context. This is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And the team is engaged in establishing what the KPIs are and what those targets are, and that we're going to spend time as a team in problem solving. And it's in a lot of ways it's common sense, but it's the rigor and discipline. And so I actually found that a lot of people, again, it's an analytical culture. A lot of people sort of took to that pretty readily. And what you have to do is just avoid that becoming just an exercise. And the movement away from talking about all the great things we were doing and explaining things, to people being comfortable with questions and seeing questions as a good thing, a thing that was trying to help them. In other words, as a leader, you're trying to serve people by helping them get more focused or bringing a different insight, as opposed to it's a gotcha question, right? Or you're trying to show you're smarter than somebody else in the meeting. And I think there's been development across over these last 5 years. Again, can't speak for all of GE, but there's definitely been a movement towards that kind of candor, transparency, humility, focus being very normalized now. It's you walk into lots of operating reviews and that's what they feel like.
Yeah.
From what was probably more not as much candor, transparency, focus, humility in facing the operating challenges that there were before. Again, this is a big company. I'm not speaking for the whole thing. There's a range of things across this company, but I think that journey has really been a key part of the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think it can be a vicious cycle. Let me explain for a second. So if a CEO or a really key executive in the organization is coming into a business and reviewing the performance with that president or his and her team, there's sort of this potential that we present only the good parts of the story to the person who's coming and seeing the performance of the team, in the hopes that this convinces that executive that we know what we're doing, we have everything under control. And the vicious cycle part of that is the executive who's coming in uses that as a validation or a justification for why his or her leadership style is great, because this business is winning, because everything is green. And meanwhile, we're not having a real conversation, to your point, around what are the key problems in the business that ail us right now that we need to get after and focus on. And it's sort of this almost emotional shift that has to happen in a culture like this, where we need to make people understand that being red is okay, talking about problems is okay, allocating the right percent of the conversation towards talking about what we're doing well versus what we're not doing well needs to maybe shift, and a lot of times towards the things we're not doing so well. And it's not because you're not doing a good job, it's because all businesses have problems. GE, Danaher, all of them, Toyota, even the most world-class companies. And I think what makes them world-class is exactly what you just described, which is the culture of we're going to focus on solving problems.
Yeah, that's right. So this is one of the key things I've learned just as a leader, as a lean practitioner, is to shift the center of gravity towards a continuous improvement mindset, is I would just say. Carol Dweck wrote a great book called Growth Mindset. And it's about this idea about when you have a setback, how do you view it? Do you view it as a crisis, or do you view it as a learning experience? And if you look at elite athletes and hear them talk, and when they, for example, Scotty Scheffler, great golfer, recently didn't finish all that well. It's the best golfer in the world. And if you listen to the interview afterwards, he said, look, I'm trusting the process. I learned a lot. There's some key things. This is the best golfer in the world. And so I think elite organizations have this hunger, this inbred hunger for wherever we are, we can get better. And so it isn't about all the, you want to recognize the things that are going well, but it's finding what do customers really want? How can we eliminate some waste so we can feed the flywheel that drives the business? How can we take our net promoter score from X to Y? And that ambition for even better is and then couple that with a, a, a continuous improvement mindset, I think that's what clears the air. So that when you want to spend 80% of your time talking about problems, and you demand a level of operating discipline around KPIs, and it has to show up in daily management, and et cetera, et cetera. It's in service of these larger, bigger goals of we're always going to get better. And if you look at elite organizations and elite performers, they fundamentally have an engine of continuous improvement inside the way they think about waking up every morning.
Yeah. And I would say it expands all functions within the business, not just maybe the traditional things we think about lean being applied to, like the four walls of a factory, as an example.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, a lot of the places we ended up applying all these principles were in really, I mean, look at the software business. That's not about a manufacturing business.
There's no
It's about
manufacturing.
it's about time to value. It's about annual recurring revenue. It's about churn. It's all those things.
So I want to talk about bureaucracy and complexity a little bit. So I can imagine part of the story, and if you read the books like Lights Out and other books on GE, they talk about GE maybe getting outside of their core areas of competency, and getting into financials and entertainment and all these different things with their businesses, that they became too big, too complex, too bureaucratic, too unmanageable, too unwieldy, all those adjectives to describe complexity, if you will. So how important is it to be, let me change the question. How important is it for a leader like yourself coming into an organization to really get your arms around the complexity and the bureaucracy that stands in the way of what you're trying to do, that you talked about earlier, like those singular focuses around the flywheel, customer priorities, where the business is ailing currently? Because these processes and controls and hierarchies can almost take on a life of its own, and they almost seem to be like the business is in service of them versus the other way around. And taking it all apart can almost be daunting, and in some organizations people view it as like insurmountable, and it's like not solvable. Therefore, here we are. And you could probably name like the US Post Office and like all these different organizations where it's just like, how do we get after this big elephant that's just taken on a life of its own? So in your experience at GE, how much of that did you come across, and how did you guys break through that? Because
Yeah, well,
it seems like you did quite a bit.
yeah, well, I think that's one of the things is simplifying the organization and getting it more focused. I think that's certainly the case. My own experience with this inside in leading the business is that there's a bunch of things that a company this size and scale and brand and longevity that are money. You don't want that stuff going away. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a reason why this company is so great, and much of what's great is still in there. But as you said, it can get trapped inside of all things to all people, too much complexity. So my own experience working at the company was a real imperative to get focused and to not let the other things distract. But that's a broader story about how did GE deal with legacy complexities. You look at where it ended up. I mean, just as an employee, look where it ended up is 3 great standalone companies that are crystal clear on what their mission is, and their CEOs are not distracted at all. And there's very little. I mean, obviously there's big companies, but they are very, very focused on their customers. Now, again, a great thing about the company, and this is something you have to, when you walk into an organization, it's super easy to come in and say, look, here's all the things I know how to do, and this is what we're going to do. How do you activate what's already there? This is a company with deep, deep passion for its customers, like nothing you've ever seen before. Bringing electricity people, putting planes up in the air and bringing people safe at home. The healthcare, right? Saving people's life, changing the future of healthcare, which is the way GE Healthcare talks about it. And so that passion is very, very real every single day. And so it's really, in a lot of ways, just aligning with the core passion of the company and not letting these other things letting those other things just fall back and really, and the more you do that, the more you're likely to spend more of your time focused on the things that'll really create the great future.
Yeah. Yeah, from the outside looking in, I can see sort of things that were really about reducing complexity, like of course the decentralization and separation of the three businesses. That's like the biggest one you can see from the outside. But you talked about standard KPIs and metrics and a standard work around how you carry out an operating review and standardization around the business operating rhythm of all the things that we do throughout the year and how those things are carried out so that there aren't surprises in terms of how we deliver results to shareholders and investors and things like that. And then just the simplification of priorities. And I know you guys use the Hoshin-Conry process within GE. We refer to it as policy deployment in Danaher, which is really about how do you take your strategic plan and distill it down to the 3 to 5 key imperatives and go execute the hell out of those things and do it well. So it's like simplicity through focus, right? And banishing the complexity, which going back to that earlier conversation we had is about people feeling like a sigh of relief where we may be doing things a little differently, but we're doing things in a focused manner that I can devote my attention to things that really matter to the organization that I care about and that I'm passionate for. And I think that in a sense creates pull culturally for people wanting to participate in a transformation like that, because they don't view this as checking the box. Like, we are really fixing the business and I can get excited about that. I want to participate in that. So did you sense that energy inside the culture of GE where like people were just like, were they leaning in or were they pushing back from the table as all these changes were being made? You there? Oh no, we lost Pat.
Hey, Damon.
Yep. You were frozen there a second. Did you hear my question?
Um, I heard most of it, but could you? Hopefully, that doesn't happen again. Sorry about that if it was on my side.
Yeah, no worries. So the kind of the gist of it was when the organization's focusing on the right key priorities, people may feel like this is a tremendous change effort and there's a cultural resistance. But I've actually found that the opposite is true. When people feel like you're working on the right things that matter and we're truly fixing the business, people tend to lean in more than they push away from the table in terms of this transformation that you guys are going through. So what was it like at
That's
GE trying
that,
to?
that's absolutely the case. That what you just said is absolutely the case. Again, this is an organization where people come to work at this company in order to be on mission. And so anything that you can do to get stuff out of the way and create focus and start to get, I mean, one of the key things is sort of how does lean really work? There's this real balance in lean between you want breadth, you want to cover the whole organization, you want to drive impact, but lean works best at depth. It doesn't work well 1 inch deep. So
Yeah.
what you've got to do is you need to start someplace, start to show progress, get those good reps, get good coaching, start to make progress. Don't let the KPI explode. Start to make that progress. If those are on key priorities, I mean, my experience at the company is you get all the very best of the organization because they really, in GE Healthcare, they really do care about saving people's lives and inventing the next, the next medical technologies. The aerospace team really does care about jet engines and how they operate, both in commercial and in defense. And of course, GE Vernova is what powering 30% of the world's energy, something like that. I mean, it's a very, and I keep saying this, but it's a very powerful set of capabilities it has. So anything you can do to create more focus and impact on things that matter to customers, it's like that's what gets the flywheel moving.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership behaviors, and I'll start with a quick story about Larry Culp, and you probably have several others that you can share with us. So we were working with you guys at GE in Greenville, and I think South Carolina is where that plant is.
Yep.
I think it's Park Power. and the plant manager there, Larry shows up, basically says, I'm going to make a tour, and basically tells the plant manager, look, don't organize anything in advance, don't let this be a dog and pony show. Larry shows up in blue jeans and tours the factory and wants to spend his time like actually reviewing the operation. So to me, that's like a key leadership behavior, right? There's a lot of things to unpack there. There's
Yeah.
humility, there's servant leadership, there's going to Gemba, there's seeing with your own eyes, like all these sort of things that just come so natural to Larry, and then surprised this plant manager. And I think one of the comments he made was, CEO's never been to my factory, despite that this was one of the largest factories in GE. So how do you take what comes natural to Larry and yourself and teach a new way of leading, maybe that wasn't as familiar and comfortable to people inside of GE? Because it's not as simple as just saying, hey, go to Gemba and go see what's happening,
Right.
because then that becomes a field trip. And so how do you make that cultural shift? Because I know
Yeah.
you did, because a lot of the key leaders and executives are on Kaizen events, and I
That's
see
right.
them post on LinkedIn about all these things that they're doing around very similar to Larry. So they made the shift somehow. So, but how did
That's
you
right.
do that?
Yeah, I think well, certainly leading by example. As you said, Larry's tremendous at this. It's one of his many superpowers. There's some key elements there that you mentioned is serving the operator is really important. There's a place where Gemba lives, where the value is really added or destroyed, right? It's where the action happens. There's people that operate on the business at that place, serving the operator to understand how do we help the operator become more successful. But there's also trying to see the process operating and not make assumptions, but actually ask, how is the process working? What's before and after this process? And I think that the modeling of that and avoiding doing that in a fake way, where it's more like tourism or whatever you just said.
Yeah.
You're sort of walking the steps, and everybody's been through factory tours like that. It's not
Yeah, where
unique
the
to GE.
comms team is following you with a camera, and then
That's right. That's right.
posting every day about you going to the factory and all these kinds of things.
Another key factor was actually making the time to do that in a way that's high quality. You can't do that in 10 minutes. That's not a 10-minute exercise, at least in my experience. You actually have to slow down and ask some questions and try to understand. That's the other thing is you're trying to really understand. You can't come in as an expert. It's a real mistake. You're not the expert. The operators are the expert. And so I think it was led from the top, and 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 when it was going a direction that wasn't productive, it was obvious what the difference was, and real time coaching happened, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So obviously, in a transformation of this size and complexity and difficulty, the old saying that you got to break some eggs to make a cake. So certainly everything wasn't as rosy and perfectly planned over the 4 or 5 years that you were a participant in this. So as you reflect back on the journey, what were some of the things that maybe you guys didn't get right? You
Yeah.
wish you had a do over, and maybe that helped with the learning. You don't necessarily have to do those things over, but it just accelerated your learning, if anything else.
One of the things that I think I mentioned it earlier that I think is one of the challenges at scale, and we faced it. And I think we had a pathway we took, ended up working out well. So I don't say it's not like I would throw it away and do something completely different. But clearly we were trying to figure it out is how do you get depth and breadth simultaneously? How do you be sure you avoid doing things just at the surface, filling out forms, training people and assuming that the training automatically will generate results?
Yeah.
Communicating a lot of what the standards ought to be, but actually not knowing whether it was done well or not. So, but on the other hand, this is a large organization, a couple 100,000 people. These are giant businesses. They're global businesses. They have many functions. And so if you're only too narrowly focused, in order to get depth and impact, you'll make progress there, but it'll take you forever to get the
Yeah.
whole organization. So I think that challenge of depth and breadth, and really what we decided there was, I mean, I say we because it really was, is it's more the top of the company, is we're going to make sure the leaders can lead with the lean mindset. That was going to be an important leverage point. But that question about, are we being focused enough that we can really be sure that it's real when it's built, as opposed to it's just a veneer. On the other hand, you do too much of that, and you look back a year later and say, we didn't make the rate of progress that we wish we had across a broad enough range. That's probably the overall challenge associated with this size and scale of transformation. And we made a set of choices that in order to try to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think in an organization of that size, it becomes really important to almost copy paste yourself as quickly as possible. And it's almost using the Pareto concepts, like what are the top 500 leaders in this business? Let's look at the revenue and impact of that, and like where we're going to focus and who do we need to teach and prioritize first, so that they can do this on their own rather quickly.
Right. Another thing that we found during this is, and you mentioned Kaizen. Kaizen's a super important for this. These are Kaizen events. They take a week long. It's really elevated problem solving at a very cross-functional level in an intensive way. For those that are listening that may not know about this, Kaizen is also the Japanese term for continuous improvement, but this is a Kaizen event. So we would use Kaizen events as catalytic events. That was a really important thing. If you overplay that, you end up with way too many Kaizens that aren't having impact, as opposed to focusing on the most critical. And that was a journey of, you sort of let that out into the wild, and all of a sudden you got dozens and dozens of Kaizens, and you can't sustain them. You don't know if they're going to have impact. And so we had to figure that out and figure out a way. And again, this is a journey. I had to figure that out in my own organizations, how to make sure it's high quality Kaizen, because what you don't want is people coming to Kaizens and you don't get anything done. You just spend a week sort of muddling around. People leaving those events are not going to have a good view. They'll view it as, I'm not sure exactly what we got done that week. And frankly, in my own organizations, I made mistakes like that. I assumed it would be well led, well focused, clear outcomes, not just a meeting for a week to talk about a set of problems, but really a concrete output we're going to get as a result of accelerated problem solving that week.
Yeah. As you think about the sustainability of everything that's been put in place at GE, Larry's going to retire someday, and and the other leaders of these businesses are going to retire someday. So one of the things that I just found remarkable, and I still find remarkable about my experience at Danaher, is I was there during, I think, three leadership changes at the CEO level. Larry, then Tom Joyce, then Reiner Blair. And I remember feeling like never was DBS at risk of being lost in the shuffle in terms of a priority. And almost people were like, okay, great, we have a new leader, but we know that leader is going to lead DBS in the way that we're all used to, and we'll probably take it to the next level, and they always did. What's in place at GE to ensure that happens as well, so that there isn't another turnaround required down the road, when when GE maybe lost their way. And it's a hard question, because honestly, it's like every organization suffers from this challenge. Is like, how do we build this organization to last?
It is. I think, Damon, this is one of the key challenges of building a sustained greatness in lean. It really is. You look at the history of companies, and it's almost like current success is the best predictor of future failure, because somehow the core disciplines just erode. And so I think constant vigor on this thing. One of the phrases sometimes I use on this is, lean has no grandchildren, it only has children. It's always one generation away in management from disappearing or going bad. And so if you think about that, it's always one generation. I think the way this is sustained, and again, these are three separate companies now, right? So they're going to live three separate lives, is the active work of the current management with candor, transparency, focus, humility, commitment to continuous improvement. It's I think it's all about leadership, and then finding how do we take this to the next business problem, so it isn't just stuck, it isn't only stuck in the factory, but it becomes more pervasive. And there's other mechanisms to do this, how the immersion process works when people join the company, so they know what the expectations are. But I think it's a very important issue. And I'm not speaking about GE, just in general. I just watch other companies, and it's not easy. You have to keep working at it as a leadership team to model it, to teach it, to insist that we get good results from it, so that, and we keep raising expectations. All that creates this, durability of the mindset and and you have to hire to it as well. You've got to be sure that you don't have pockets of, especially senior management. You don't have pockets of senior management that's not committed, because that won't end well.
Yeah, it's almost like, we just have to be constantly tilling the field and weeding the field and watering the field. It's like the field never goes away, right? Like, we got to tend to our crops. And I think you said it. I think your opening sentence was, something about like success. Success can be your biggest downfall because you think that success is a given.
That's right.
Because we've experienced success in the past, and Jim Collins talks a lot about that. It's like the hubris before the fall and success and these kinds of things. And he talks about the crates being constructive paranoia is what keeps you on top and keeps you built to last, is never being satisfied with where you are. You can be happy with the progress and the results that you're making. Not to say that the organization needs to be beat up all the time about that, but never being satisfied. Right? I think is
that's right. So again, I'll use a golfing analogy. There's a great golfer named Bryson DeChambeau. He's one of the greatest golfers in the world. He was asked, how many golf balls has he hit? And he said, I think I've hit 200 golf balls a day for 20 years, which means it's more than 1 million.
Yeah.
So does Bryson DeChambeau ever stop hitting 200 golf balls a day? I don't think so. As long as he's at that elite level, he's going to, now, where he hits them and how he hits them and what instruction he gets or whatever it is, he's never stopping hitting 200 golf balls a day because he's an elite golfer. And I think that's true of elite performers. They're always at their craft.
100%. Yeah. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan.
That's right.
Novak Djokovic.
That's right. Look at Steph Curry. I wonder whether he practices free throws or not. He has one of the highest percentages, right? The answer is obvious.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know it's a sports analogy that sometimes doesn't work, but I think it's very real for sustaining excellence and continuous improvement, is always being at your craft.
On that note, you ready to take some questions from the group?
Sure.
All right. This question here is from Janelle. What I found in transforming my last plant was that people knew a lot about potential solutions, but they had previously been told no by someone else, which caused them to no longer share their ideas. Do you have recommendations on how to bring along a culture that has felt unheard, and recommendations on how to bring the new ideas into the culture that believes they are already the best?
There's a couple of questions in there. That believes it's already the best. I think one of the best ways there is to compare it to customer expectations. There's no bright light as bright as customer expectations.
Can you give a quick example of that, like on-time delivery as an example?
On-time delivery is a good example, right? There's Net Promoter Scores, another, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are businesses I've been around that have Net Promoter Scores as good as Coca-Cola and Nike do in their markets, and they're still getting better all the time. Yeah. So the question is, where are customers' expectations? Let's not compare to our previous performance or some other operating division. Let's compare to what our most demanding customers want. How are we going to win market share? How are we going to earn more value so we get more profit from the customer? That external focus is, I have found over my career, the number one way of not getting enamored with your own performance. Yeah. Is just what is the external expectation? In terms of surfacing ideas, I think you can't fake this stuff. I think Kaizen is a great way to get through this. Bring in the people that really know the process and honor those operators by incorporating and try storming it, right? Taking one of those ideas, shaping it into something that can be measured, and trying it out. But I think that you've got to, this is a place where actions speak louder than words, and you have to figure out who are the operators that you need to get together and do a rapid tri-storm PDCA cycle so you can start to make progress. And there's many examples in GE where this is exactly what we did. What the overall organization did was really find the embedded knowledge in the organization and focus it, and then iterate rapidly to get impact.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that comes along with that is you enlist people in making the change. They experience that positive experience. Then they go back to their workplace and they repeat that because they don't feel powerless anymore. They've been given a set of tools, a new way of thinking, and a responsibility to make their work better without bureaucracy and approval and decisions and things like that maybe they felt like they needed before, that they couldn't get those ideas in the front. We said, look, no, great, implement those ideas. We just did a Kaizen, implemented all of them, and go back to your work and don't wait for another Kaizen, do it again. And then this really carries over into a lot of areas rather quickly. And tying back to your earlier challenge of how do you get scale and breadth, that's one of the ways you can do it is.
Yeah, so Damon, just to build on that idea, one of the things I can really, I've learned this in my years at GE is walking into places and seeing, is the process really owned here at Gemba? Or do people feel like they're sort of living in the process?
Yeah.
And if you can get a small team, especially cross-functional, really owning the continuous improvement journey of their work, it's like magic, because now all of a sudden it's its own fuel. And so that's a great spot to target, is how do you get people close to the work, owning the results and owning the process, and clearing out things that are confusing or diluting that effort.
All right. This next question is from Evan. And he says, how did you overcome associates at GE who do not want to adopt the journey or believe in the lean journey? Surely you had a couple.
Yeah, sure. I think, this is not GE specific. I think this is really about change management in a lot of ways. And there's sort of this thing that I've learned over my career in this is that, where's the gap? Is it a will gap or a skill gap? Because all of us have skill gaps. Have we done this before? Sometimes people actually want to make the change. They're motivated to do it. They're just not confident that they can make it. Sometimes there's a will gap. Look, I've been perfectly fine for 25 years. What's this all about? And I think, as I said earlier, the best way to tackle that is to make sure we're comparing to customers' expectations. So sure, along the journey of these, there are early adopters, there's middle adopters, and there's late adopters. My other coaching would be, don't spend a lot of time on the most resistant part of the organization. Really focus on the fact that you can find people that are early adopters, and they can bring in the rest of the group. And all of a sudden now, there's internal peer pressure that naturally emerges because some teams are making more progress than other teams. Yeah, I think another, just as a personal level, again, this is over a long career, is sitting down with somebody. It seems like you're not comfortable with this. What's going on? And sometimes there's a no, what's in it for me answer, right? Why would I want to do this? This seems like a lot of hard work. Yeah. We've been doing things pretty well in the past, and really trying to understand what's underneath that at a very personal level. People come to work every day wanting to do good work. They don't come to work thinking, I think I'm going to mess the place up today. So, they're good people. They want to work hard. They want to work on the right things. Understanding what's that barrier is sometimes really instructive.
Yeah, that's great advice. So this person, Mike McMillan, you may know him. He picked up on your sports analogy. So to get better at lean and lean leadership, what do you recommend one practices every day? What is the equivalent to hitting 200 golf balls a day for lean?
Right. So I really believe that the way you get good at lean is good reps, good coaching. Again, I use the golf analogy. If all you do is go out and hit golf balls, you're not getting better. And if all you did
is that my problem?
Or if all you did is just get good coaching, but never put your feet on the grass, You'd be like an academic golfer. You actually have to have both of those. So what the good reps, it's the PDCA cycle. So it's what daily management, it's these four key things: standard work, daily management, action plan, problem solving. That is the engine. That's the PDCA engine. And if you get good reps on that, that's the equivalent of hitting 200 golf balls. Again, Bryson DeChambeau does not hit a random 200 golf balls. He's doing something very focused. And so focus on your most important KPIs and get a high quality PDCA cycle running. That's the equivalent of hitting 200 golf balls.
All right. This question's from Madrid, Spain, from Martin. What's the secret formula to embed the culture of lean throughout the organization? And did you have to explain to the managers why the organization is embarking on this journey to get them involved?
I think it is important to put the lean journey in the context of the business objectives. Otherwise, it just comes in like a program of the day.
Yeah, Larry called it embracing reality. I remember he said that a lot.
That's right. And so I think that explaining this in the context of what our business objectives are, how does our flywheel work, and where do we need to focus? And this idea that you have to want to get good at getting better. It's sort of a fundamental career decision. A big turning point in my career in lean was I was 52 years old at the time. And so I've been working 30 years by now. And I went to see a president of a company, and I saw it just running better than I'd ever seen a business run before. And I thought, I want to know how that works. But it was really a commitment on my part to want to get better. And so I think the question would be, where does the organization really need to get better in order to serve customers, win more, be more profitable? And then explain that if you're going to want to get better, you have to have a methodology to get better. You're not just going to get better by waking up. And so the best process I know to getting better is PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust. And it's been proven over decades and hundreds of companies. And so if you have a better approach to getting better, then go ahead and use it. But fundamentally, are we going to get better? And are we going to get good at getting better? Where we're going to make it we're going to create professional aptitude, and we're going to have craft work on how to get better. And I think that's a fundamental motivator to great organizations.
100%. Do we have time for you for one more? This question is from Janelle. I'm looking to go from leading one large plant to leading multiple plants. In the past, as a plant leader, I have been annoyed by the corporate help to install programs across all plants as a one-size-fits-all. What advice do you have for driving process improvement across multiple sites and not getting organ rejection from the plants, I guess is what we're saying here?
Yeah, well, everybody's had that feeling of we're from corporate, we're here to help you.
Yeah.
That sort of feeling like, everybody wants to duck and cover basically, because this too shall pass if I just wait long enough. I think you've got to activate the local leadership. I started managing multiple plants probably 25 years ago. And what I found was, I'd show up, everybody prepare, then I'd show up, and it was whatever state it was. And I'd make my comments about how to get better. I bet within a week of when I was there, maybe a day, they were just back to running the business the way they wanted to run it. The only way that was really going to work was whether that local leadership felt like this is fundamentally what we want to do. Spend the time up front to get that right. This is why are we doing this? How does it fit in our strategy? What is our flywheel? What is our imperative? And make sure that that's specific at that plant. If you've done, all the principles are common, but the implementation sequence is customized for the needs of that organization. And don't fool yourself thinking that by saying something at the top, it's going to happen. The fundamental engine of lean is at the daily management level. If it doesn't live in daily management, it doesn't live. So it's not going to get to daily management a point of impact unless the local leaders are leading that way.
Yeah, I think it's so key to focus on that plant's issue in that plant's lean transformation journey, which is very different than another plant's issues and lean transformation journey.
That's right.
Otherwise, it becomes lean by checklist or a lean bingo card where we just
That's
go in, we're going to try to implement all these tools and all these plants in a consistent way. Meanwhile, our customers are screaming at us going, where are my parts? Or why is your quality poor? So we're not dealing with real issues.
There has to be an imperative that drives the lean journey.
100%. Well, Pat, that was a very fast 1 hour. We're going to have to do this again sometime. So I want to thank you. So before we bid farewell to Pat, I'd like to encourage everyone to take a moment and reflect on the valuable insights that he's given us today and the practical advice that he's also shared, and how you can apply these lessons, more importantly, to your organization's own lean journey. If you have any further questions or would like to explore the possibilities of initiating or enhancing your own lean transformation, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can support you on your journey every step of the way. And once again, we give our heartfelt gratitude to Pat for sharing his time today and all of his experiences and expertise with us. And I'm grateful for your contribution, Pat, to this interview series. It's great to see you again, and wish you the best on this stage of retirement, I guess. Although it doesn't sound like you're fully retired, you're pretty active in a lot of different endeavors. So for those on the call, thank you for joining, and hope to see you on another edition of Lean Catalyst next month, where we'll have another conversation just like this one. Thank you all, and thank you, Pat. Have a great rest of your
You're welcome, David.
Bye now.
Bye.